No, when you exercise, you increase muscle mass. When you meditate, you decrease personal existence.
Personal what?
Existence.
Existence.
It's a negation activity. Meditation is negation activity. All you have to do is be. All you have to do is be who you are and be there. Who you are has wisdom. Who you are is never affected by circumstances, and who you are can see the appropriate response to every situation. That's the beauty of this. It doesn't involve thinking, it doesn't involve changing, it doesn't involve improving, it doesn't involve getting any better. All those projects, that's why Joan Tullison, when she wrote the last book she wrote, she called it Death, the End of Self-Improvement. And what we're up to here, don't worry, this isn't serious, but what we're up to here is dying. As soon as you say the word, people's, death nerve goes off. Dying? No, but what we're up to here is dying, and we're up to is dying in the real way, dying in the way that death actually occurs, what we're up to here. And as my teacher said, if you really understood things as they are, if you understood the way things really are, the thing that you would want most is to die. But if you only understood things the way they are, if somebody hears that in the way that they normally listen, they would say, now how would I want that? How would I want them to die? Well, that's because of the misunderstanding about death, because the only death that actually ever occurs is the death of something that was never born. The only death that actually occurs is the death of something that's not real. And that which wasn't born and isn't real, that you consider yourself to be, is the source of suffering. You want that to come to an end. You want this process that's occurring in your mind all day long and in your emotions all day long to come to an end.
So are you talking about death of the personality or death of the body?
Both. But the death of the body, you can still have the body and experience death. And that's the recommendation. The recommendation is to die as soon as possible. And the death that I'm referring to is the death of the personality. And the death of the personality occurs as soon as you realize that it's not real and you're not it. That's its death. As long as you consider yourself to be the personality and think that it is real, you get to suffer the life of the personality, which occurs in the thought process and in the emotional experience that you're having all the time. And because the personality is running on a survival program, right, its whole existence is a function of paying attention in such a way that it can determine what's going to hurt it and what's going to kill it. And so all day long, it's like hypervigilant. You see, but you're so used to being hypervigilant that it doesn't occur to you to be hypervigilant. Anything that's a consistent experience, it goes unseen. Just like your breath is a consistent experience, you have to pay attention to it to notice it. But it's happening all the time. Your mental activity and the hypervigilance that's going on in your mental activity is going on so consistently, it's normal. It doesn't seem like there's anything abnormal about it. But when you start to practice meditation and you start to relax the physical body and calm the mind, then you begin to see how abnormal what you thought normal was. You get to see that what you call normal is crazy. What you call normal is constantly dealing with disturbing thoughts, constantly dealing with disturbing emotions, constantly dealing with disturbing behavior, yours and other people's, right? That's what we call normal. When you start to wake up, it becomes evident to you that's not normal. It's not normal to be in conflict with reality. It's not normal to be in conflict with other people, and it's not normal to be in conflict with yourself. And you can't get out of that condition unless you wake up and realize that the reason you're in that condition is because you mistook yourself for something that doesn't actually exist. You mistook yourself, as most people do, as all people do, you mistook yourself to be a physical body and a personality. Nothing wrong with that if it progresses to the next level. There's nothing wrong with that if you mature beyond it. But if you don't mature beyond it, you're living a life of suffering. You're living a life of suffering because the programming that's running the operation is paying attention in order to notice what's wrong, to notice what's here that shouldn't be here. That's what the mental state is doing all the time. Noticing what's here and what's happening that shouldn't be here and shouldn't be happening. And therefore I reject it, and therefore I resist it, and therefore it bothers me and it upsets me, and I have to either try and do something to change it or get away from it or take drugs. The mistake that people make is they think that what's causing you to be upset is another person or a circumstance. This is one of the key understandings that's important to allow yourself to grasp, right? To grok. Because if you do understand this and you practice this, it can be the road to freedom. It can be the road to peace. And the teaching says that while it occurs to us that what's disturbing me or upsetting me is what somebody's doing, right? Or saying, in reality, in truth, that's not the source of the upset. The source of the upset is the state of mind that you're in while that's happening. That's where the suffering is. The suffering is in the state of mind you're experiencing, not what somebody else is doing. The evidence for that is clear. You know, if somebody does something that disturbs you, but it doesn't bother me, they can't be the source of the upset. If they were the source of the upset, we'd have to both be upset. Can you see that? Doesn't that make sense? You know, if what I'm saying is the source of the upset, right, then everybody here will be upset, right? But if what I'm saying is not really the source of the upset, and the way you hear it and what goes on in your nervous system about it and the thoughts that come up for you about it cause you to be in a state of upset, that's your mind that's upset. But you don't want to have your conditioning be what you depend on, because the conditioning is a distortion. The conditioning is what got passed on to you from the people that were here before you, and that got passed on to them from the people that were there before them. And unfortunately, what gets passed on more than anything else is ignorance. That's why we're in the toilet right now as a country, because too many generations have passed ignorance and blindness and stupidity and superficiality on to their children, and now they'll believe anything. That's dangerous. So the only thing that you have to see, the good news is if you understand these teachings, the only thing you have to deal with is your own mind, and you have absolute ability to deal with that. On the other hand, you don't have the ability to control other people, and you don't have the ability to control circumstances, you don't have the ability to control life, you don't have the ability to control what the president says or what the people running for president says. You don't have the ability to control any of that. I was working with a client today, and she's a relatively new client, but she's very bright and she's very interested in meditation, and she's practicing meditation. And in the beginning, what she was talking about as a psychotherapeutic topic was her relationship with her mother, and she said her mother could be obnoxious, and when her mother's around, she gets upset and she can't control herself, and so she tells her mother about how her mother is, and then her mother gets upset, and it doesn't work, and she's done this a million times. So we had one conversation about her mother, and the next time we met, she said, "The problem with my mother is over." And the conversation we had about her mother was, I said, it's not your mother that's upsetting you, it's what happens in your mind when she's around that's upsetting you. And she got that. She got that. Yeah, she got that. And she stopped reacting to her mother like her mother should be different. Don't forget, the source of suffering is that what's happening shouldn't be happening. But it is. It is, right? And so if you're going to be wise, if you're going to be enlightened, right, then what's happening is what's happening, and you get that that's what's happening, it's really happening, right? And because that's happening, it doesn't mean that I have to be upset. That's not true. It doesn't mean that I have to be upset. So she came back the next week and she said, I've been around my mother at different occasions and I don't get upset anymore. Rocks are hard, water's wet, my mother's my mother. I don't react to the rocks, I don't react to the water, and I don't react to my mother anymore either. She said, now, but I have another situation that I want to work on. She said, can we talk about Trump now? And I said, it's really the same thing. It's really the same thing, And the reality of it is that when you're awake and you perceive things as they really are, right? Instead of getting upset with the person, you recognize that what you have to deal with is the state of mind you're in. And then the conversation becomes about how do you deal with the states of mind that you're in. And that's part of the teaching that we're talking about here. The way you deal with the states of mind that come up for you, which is coming from your conditioning, right, is to be aware of them, right, and not identify with them. It's running on its own. Yeah. The impetus to respond to things instead of react to things, and to do what works instead of do what your reaction tells you to do. There's a possibility that we're talking about here. The possibility is that life can work. The possibility is that your relationships can work. The possibility is that you can be happy, satisfied, and peaceful. That's what the possibility is. And how do we know that? Because people who have practiced meditation and started to experience the reality of what they were, their true nature, the natural state, they stopped being upset about anything. And they were a lot more effective and responsive to the situations they find themselves in. Why? Because you can see what's really going on. And so you don't deal with it in an angry reaction, or you don't deal with it in a fearful state. No. You deal with it by seeing it for what it is and recognizing the possibilities for action that will work to respond to it. We can't see the problem is when you get triggered and you're in a reactive state, you can't see all the possibilities for behavior. You only see the ones that have to do with getting away or fighting. That's all you can see. But if you're awake, right, and you're dealing with your mind, so that's not determining how things are occurring for you, and you can see things in a more clear way, right, then you can also see all the possibilities for action, and you can choose a possibility that will actually work, a possibility that you couldn't see if you were upset and your attention was limited to only escaping or fighting. It takes time. You know what I mean? If you're coming from a normal understanding of reality and a normal understanding of who you are, you have to expose yourself to these teachings a little bit at a time. It's radically different, right? So the mind will say, yeah, well, what about this? What about that? What about this, right? Or it'll be confusing, or it'll be paradoxical, right? But the truth occurs that way when you're not familiar with it. But if you keep exposing yourself to it, it's like pieces of a puzzle. You know, those of you who've been coming into the class, I'm sure you've noticed this, right? There are things that made no sense to you, right? And then just by listening to different ways to talk about it, at some point you say, oh, I get that now. I didn't get that before, but I get that now. And then something else that was confusing you, and then you see that, right? So what's happening is you're seeing parts of reality clear up. You're seeing parts of reality appear to you as they actually are instead of what you thought. But it takes time, and if you keep coming back and studying the teachings and deepening your understanding, the pieces of the puzzle start to appear, and at some point, if you stay with it, you see the whole thing. You see things as they actually are, and then you can practice living your life consistent with the truth, right? And when you're living with the way things actually are, you can be responsive and you can behave consistent with that, and guess what? Life works. Life works. The suffering comes to an end because you stop insisting that other people and the world be different. I mean, if you just look at that on the face value, you know, that the way you're living your life is without noticing it necessarily, but the reality of it is that you're insisting that other people and the world itself and reality itself be different. That's what you're insisting, and you won't give up that. You won't give up. And how you're going to prove that you're right about that is to be miserable. Right? I'm miserable. The reason I'm miserable is because of you. You're making me miserable. And as long as I attribute the source of my misery to something that's not really the source, Can I ever resolve it? No, I can keep getting divorces, right? But the next wife is going to be the new problem. Yeah, because the whole time the problem was my own mind and the way my mind was interpreting what was going on. But it was telling me, right? It was telling me that the source of my suffering, the source of what was going on, was not my mind. It was the other person. And so they either had to get their act together or leave me alone. And if you've done that enough times, you begin to realize there's something fishy here. Something fishy here, you know, because I keep exchanging one person for a new, I keep getting new candidates to make me happy and they always fail. So I'm going to have to make a more intensive interview the next time.